Okay, this video is quotes in alphabetical order. First is Nicholas Wade. He writes a lot about evolutionary biology. First quote, only 3% of the human genome is devoted to genes. The rest is mostly yards of filler material. Actually, they often call it junk DNA, but actually a lot of it's regulatory DNA. It's very useful and important, okay? Among the Aikung men, they are driven wild by a woman who has fat protuberant buttocks, presumably a signal of her being able to nourish a child in a difficult environment. Women store omega-3 fats, which are needed for babies' brain development, on their butt because it's an energetically efficient place to carry them. And that's why to men it's a sign of reproductive health. So in a sense, she's got that big butt. It's like a peacock display of fertility and being a good sexual partner. So it's attractive to men. Okay. He continues, in the fragmented political conditions of medieval Europe, the church became rich and powerful, but it started to develop problems of its own. Its priests became keenly interested in passing on their property and offices to their kin. Pope Gregory VII, who was pope from 1073 to 1085, forced priests to become celibate so their loyalty would be to the church and not to their kin. Okay, but there's a little bit of truth in that, but there's more to it than that. Lots of priests and popes still had girlfriends and mistresses. Pope Julius of the Renaissance, he had a mistress and he had children, and I think he even had syphilis too. I actually think priests and popes should be allowed to get married because then you learn a lot more about life and have real life experience, and you care more about families. The Catholic Church has been largely taken over by homosexual pedophiles who want to destroy the church. So back in the old days, people used to have big families. An average of like 10 kids. So it was no big deal to send one, and everybody was poor for the most part, so it was no big deal to send one of your kids to be a priest. But nowadays, people only have one or two kids, so they don't want the kid being a priest. They want grandchildren, And anyways, I think celibacy has been the destruction of the Catholic Church. It's a disaster. They should get rid of that policy, Even though Martin Luther, I think, was a jerk and he destroyed Christendom, he was right that priests should be allowed to get married. But, Protestantism doesn't tend to work well because it becomes secular over time and it just doesn't work. Anyways, let's continue with Nicholas Wade. His next quote, science is essentially subversive in that it requires, at least in its great advances, the toppling of accepted theories and their replacement with better ones. East Asian societies tend to place high value on conformity and respect for superiors, and this is not fertile ground for science to flourish. I saw some video recently about Japan, and what they said is Japanese workers would not want to go home until the boss had went home, because otherwise that would be disrespectful. And they didn't really care about doing anything, they just wanted to not offend the boss. So I've heard a lot of stuff like that about the Japanese, even though they're real smart and hardworking. They're very conformist, okay? And obviously, anyways, enough about all that. Let's go to the next person here. This is Richard Wagner. He was the composer, okay? He said, my destiny is solitude and my life is my work. Typical of a workaholic genius. He said, the purpose of art is to make the unconscious conscious. All right, well, there's different quotes for the purpose of art. And the best one I ever heard was by Ayn Rand. She said, art is the concretization of metaphysics, meaning that you put into the art what you think is meaningful and share that with other people. Wagner continues, I believe that the art of music proceeds from God. The origin of music is the human voice. True music is the melody. The most beautiful organ of music is the human voice. The greatest composer of all time is Mozart. Music is the speech of the heart. I write music with exclamation points. Okay, we'll do one more person today. Alfred Russell Wallace. He is the biologist of Scottish descent. He was thought to be a descendant of William Wallace, the great leader of Scotland. That was in the movie. Remember that movie called Braveheart? Tom Wolfe wrote a book called Kingdom of Speech, where he compares evolutionary biology theory of Darwin with that of Wallace. Darwin was an aristocrat. Wallace was a plebeian. So Darwin emphasized competition. And the people of England liked that. The rulers of England liked that because it suggested that England had the right to imperialism to colonize places because they were superior. Survival of the fittest, and England thought they were the best. Whereas Wallace, in his writing, emphasized the benefit to a species of cooperation. And Darwin, took his gentleman status, aristocrat status, to grab the most fame for evolutionary theory. He did give some credit to Wallace. So on the topic of human evolution in particular, Wallace disagreed with Darwin. Wallace thought that natural selection could not account for the great superiority of the human brain over that of other primates. And he felt that, God had to be involved. Okay, so here's another quote by Wallace. Let me just scroll a little higher here. Okay, he says, why did so many of the greatest intellects fail while Darwin and myself hit upon the solution? First and most important, as I believe, in the early life of both Darwin and myself, we were ardent beetle hunters, an intense interest in the variety. We became travelers, collectors, and observers in some of the richest and most interesting portions of the earth. A great mystery of how species came into existence was intensified, and it haunted us. Why do some die and some live? The answer was clearly that on the whole, the best were fitted to live. For the effects of disease, the most healthy escaped. From enemies, the strongest or the swiftest or the most cunning were able to escape. From famine, the best hunters or those with the best digestion, and so on. Then it suddenly flashed upon me that this self-acting process would necessarily improve the race, because in every generation the inferior would inevitably be killed off and the superior would remain. Thus the fitted would survive. In one of my latest conversations with Darwin, he expressed himself very gloomily on the future of humanity, on the ground that in our modern civilization, natural selection had no play, and that the fittest did not survive. It is notorious that our population is more largely renewed in each generation from the lower classes than from the middle or the upper classes. Now, that's a pretty strong thing in England, the idea of classes. And last quote from Wallace. 50 years of brilliant inventions and discoveries have not added 1 inch to the moral height of mankind. Yeah, you're never going to go higher than the Gospels. Anyways, that's the quotes for today. Bottom line, I like Wallace better than I like Darwin. I think Darwin's totally exaggerated. I think evolutionary biology is a big lie. Evolutionary biology, Darwinism, or the new version of it's called neo-Darwinism, which involves the ideas of genetics. It's bogus. I was an A+ student in evolutionary biology at Stanford University, and I can tell you, evolutionary biology, however you frame it, neo-Darwinism, etc., it can't explain macroevolution. It can explain microevolution, the variety within a given species, like the different types of dogs or cows or horses or something like that. But it cannot explain the macroevolution. Macroevolution is the origin of life. It has nothing to do with the origin of life. That's geologic chemistry. That's not biochemistry. It also cannot explain the origin of complexity. There's no gradual transition in the fossil forms. The Cambrian expansion came out of nowhere. All these new body types, these new phyla, it has no way to explain that whatsoever. It can't explain orphan genes that are unique to individual species with no homologs to the other species, It can't explain why organisms are so well fitted to their environment that they had to be designed to be that way. It really can't at all. And then I've previously given lectures like the Jonathan Wells lecture, etc., where I go through all the big lies and fakes in evolutionary biology and evolutionary biology textbooks. They're really bogus, Anyways, I hope you found that helpful.